Okay, here we are. So we've done a lot of the anatomy here. I know you didn't, but we'll get you. Okay. And you saw I did have to make an adjustment on some of the grades. Did you see? You probably got a notice this morning that some of the grades changed. If you didn't, it didn't change. But it was my fault for mismarking my answer key when I did the scoring of the grades. So I got it corrected. Thanks to Kenzie and Maggie for making me aware of that particular act of stupidity that I characterized by occasionally. So that was one. So either people either got no points, 1 point, or 2 point, and whether it changed the grade or not, just depending on what your starting point was with regard to it. Okay, we've done pharynx. So I'm not going to go through the anatomy, the three different parts. From a functional standpoint, pharynx is about swallowing. So the pharynx is the active skeletal muscle structure. It's like the best way to describe it, like a funnel that's somewhat open-ended anteriorly, or closed posteriorly, we call them the pharyngeal constrictors, superior, middle, and inferior. As they constrict, we swallow. I mean, obviously, it's assisted by other muscles in the neck. Okay, nothing really exciting about that. Two skeletal muscle layers, inner muscle, whatever. And these pharyngeal constrictors are really the key. All you have to know about that. Nothing special. I don't oronasal, laryngo, because you know about that for respiratory, and you're going to know about that. To that end, since we finished that, I did not send you the recording for our, right? I didn't do a recording, even though the test is online. Did I send you a recording? No, okay. That's on tomorrow's agenda. I'll try to get that done in the morning. So the esophagus, there's nothing happens physiologically in the esophagus. What's noteworthy is the transition point between skeletal and smooth muscles. So about roughly 2/3 of the way down the esophagus, half to 2/3 of the way, I guess to be fair, probably be the average of multiple authors, is where it makes a transition from when you're actively swallowing a skeletal muscle to smooth muscle. What does that mean? Peristalsis takes over. Remember, peristalsis is that rhythmic motion, squeeze and push, that we've gone over many, many times. First circular, then longitudinal. That's what starts then. That's noteworthy. It is still, from a physiological standpoint, we have not introduced anything to facilitate chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is in the mouth, obviously chewing, teeth, etc. You have two enzymes that are present. There's some fat digestion from lingual lipase from your tongue, and mostly there is salivary amylase. The saliva have amylase. It's the last time we touch starches and carbs until they get into the small intestine. The esophagus has none of those. There's no chemical digestion. It's no mechanical digestion. It's just a passageway. But it's noteworthy as the transition going for the start of peristalsis. And it enters the stomach. And what happens there, how do we know that there's a chemical change? The abrupt change of the lining. See the slide again. We go from stratified squamous non-keratinizing to the hallmark lining cell of the entire digestive tract, stomach, not entire is a long term, the major portion of the digestive or alimentary canal. We have simple columnar with goblet cells. Why? Columnar cells can do a lot of work. They can secrete, they can absorb, they can process, all the above. They need a ton of mucus because of what the environment they're in. There's either a ton of acidity or a ton of alkalinity. And the beauty of those cells is replace them constantly. It's the most actively mitotic area certainly in the probably the post-pubescent body. After growth and development really have sort of reached their hallmark transitioning to the adulthood, there's nothing busier. We're talking about every single cell in your stomach, small and large intestine in the lining, is replaced every 3 to 6 days. Don't worry, I'm having a bad day. It's all right, you'll be gone in 3 days. See it. Kiss that cell goodbye. That was the old home run call for the Pirates. Get it? It's a baseball term. What? What? Kiss that. What? No, there's not a cell. There's a baseball in baseball. I was in the gunner, Bob, whatever his last name was, very famous in that. Baseball is timeless because of great announcers. And being a Yankee fan, I come from the Mel Barber, Phil Rizzuto days. And everybody had a home run call. Like Going, Gone was a great. Yeah. And the gunner, Bob, whatever his last name was, I saw his last game he did. We were at the old Veteran Stadium. And he got was, there it goes, kiss it goodbye. It was his, everybody has Lenny for Terry, and they're, go ball, we'll get out of here, all that type of stuff. It's like Rob Brown now when they win, which is infrequent, raising the Jolly Roger. Skeens had a pretty bad game for Saturday. Baseball, it's a sport. There's more in life than just football. I know. I'm sorry. There's soccer. Two all world free kicks yesterday. Did you happen to watch that yesterday in the Champions League?
Wait, free kick?
Yeah, 2 free kicks for goals in the Champions League.
Oh, yeah, I saw more.
Oh my God. Nobody's stopping those kicks. I mean, it starts 3 feet outside, curls around into the corner. Oh my God. They were great. Like, I've sat there stunned. Dr. Buxton just came in and goes, "Did you see those?" I went, "Yeah, it's unbelievable." We're just like stunned in my chair. Moving on. So, the esophagus, once the transition where it pierces the diaphragm, 3 things go through the diaphragm: the aorta, inferior vena cava, the esophagus. It's called the hiatus, hence the term hiatal hernia. We covered that in anatomy. That's there. A sphincter, it's not a valve. It works like a valve. It's just a thickening of the smooth muscle in such a way that it blocks, effectively, in this case, the acidic contents of the stomach from regurgitating. Okay? So when food is not being swallowed, it's not going anywhere. Mucus protects against acid reflux. Physiologically, the mucus that is produced here is carbohydrate-laden mucus. So it's very alkaline mucus to offset the immense amount of stomach acid. We talk more about the stomach acid today. These were all the layers. You saw a bit about that before already that are there. The esophagus has the same layers. Yes, it has some glands. Mucus is there, more lubricating than anything else. Not a whole lot else to say about it. So you can see it's very expansive. It folds. This is just the analogy is like one of those. Remember, I used it before, like one of those. You can go to Home Depot and get a hose that's relatively compacted, and all of a sudden it fills and it expands out. So it could be like a little package like this, a 25-foot hose, and all of a sudden, and that's kind of what that does. And you can see and here's the transition zone between simple squamous, non-keratinizing, I beg your pardon, stratified squamous, non-keratinizing, and simple columnar. And these indentations, you might remember, are the gastric pits. And it's really there where the physiology takes place. Okay, and again, reflux disease, for whatever reason, it's either a lack of functionality of the valve, however you want to describe that. All sorts of things play a role. I mean, it can be other factors, various kinds of excesses, certain kinds of food and drink. Certainly people who are I had it, and I was extreme obesity. Pregnancy, we could understand. Certain kinds of sport can do it. The hiatal hernia is more structural in nature. That can happen in the very young and in the very old. My dad had one, a hiatal hernia. I mean, he didn't have to have anything done to treat it. It was basically probably more dietary control than anything else that was done. And the big problem with all of that acidity physiologically really is damaging. Esophageal ulcerations are very, very prone to this diagnosis, esophageal cancer. And that is a very bad diagnosis. So unchecked, and it's a tragedy, if you want me to just sort of editorialize a little bit, of people who pop Tums and antacids and Rolaids and whatever they're doing to excess. I was a victim of it. I did that. I was eating them like candy, so I could function and work. And so this is they go into the swallowing. I don't go crazy with these phases. I'm not going to ask you about them. I don't get a lot out of it, to tell you the truth, so I don't ask you about it. It's there, if you want to. Which brings us really to the start of our anatomical part, which is the stomach, where it's mostly mechanical digestion. We do get some chemical digestion. You get two types. There is some gastric lipase, so we're continuing to break down fats, but limitedly so. The big player here is we start proteins. So you're going to see that's a big player. That's a very intricate process, which is really where we look at it now from a physiological standpoint. And what happens is all of this mechanical activity, this X number of hours, 4, 6, 8 hours, and various things take longer to get out of the stomach than others, break this down into a pasty substance that's very hypertonic, very hyperosmotic, if you want to consider it like this, quite acidic. And what that is called is chyme, a name that you should remember. CHYME. Just like when we talk about lymphatics, the term is chyle, CHYLE. So in the old days, they talked about chyme and chyle. But the term that, for this unit, chyme is an important term. Empty stomach, less than 2 ounces. Full stomach, a gallon. That's the beauty of your stomach. And very much like a lot of the digestive alimentary canal is this expansibility. You just saw it a little bit in the esophagus. So certainly it's not nearly as extensive, as ability to expand as much as here. When empty, the stomach mucosa forms many folds called rugae. And so when it's empty, effectively those rugae, those ridges, they're the ones you might remember as the way the food passes, because there's an oblique layer of muscle. It basically brings it along, a la an old style washboard. Washboard? If I live long enough, I'll be telling people that agitator in their washing machine. Really, what was that? Now that they're gone away. I think I am very creative with these analogies, trying to help you guys learn. Like if my shtick, so to speak, which sometimes stinks, okay, is designed to facilitate your learning experience. I've never been treated so disrespectfully. Just wait until next week. Moving back. You can tell I feel better, more bad jokes. Yeah, you don't talk that often, and you gave me a shot. It's okay. I like you. Not like some of the people. The cardia, because of the proximity. Remember the parts? Cardia, because of proximity to the heart, the fundus, the dome-shaped top, the body where most of the action goes on, narrowing to the pylorus, another sphincter that's there, voila. The interesting thing, because it plays a role physiologically, is the interior layer is oblique, facilitating that going over the ridges. And so rugae is just a term for the ridges that are there. And we see rugae, as you will see shortly, or recall, in the bladder as well. There it is, typical shape. This is all anatomy, curvature, lesser, greater, the omentum, all of those kinds of things. The interesting thing about it's such an interesting structure. The stomach, and all, for that matter, of the internal contents of the, small and large intestine, is the role that these linings, that the peritoneum plays with blood supply, with nerve supply, with lymphatics. I mean, this is a system that is extraordinarily busy, and yet has to have the ability to move completely freely, to the point where we have very little of it that's really tacked down. Your stomach can move almost at will. The only places it's tacked down, duodenum, because the common bile duct, the thing that really allows you to utilize your system, and a couple of areas of the colon, where the flexures are anatomically, and down as you get toward the sigmoid colon and finally the rectum in that area, just to stabilize it for for elimination. Other than that, it's moving. The worst thing that can happen to that is when it's not moving. For surgery sense, you might remember the term is adhesions, because when things adhere to each other, they can't freely move. And that's why I said, even in the dictation that I did, that's why my surgeon 8 hours for each of my ulcer surgeries. I can't imagine sitting in the surgical waiting room for a loved one for 8 hours, not knowing what. I mean, it had to be torture for my wife. I'm sad I put her through that. I really am. It's okay, we get along. We're splitting. My son and daughter-in-law, my ex, and my wife and I are splitting a big shower gift. Shower Sunday. Crib, all the mattress, all that good stuff. And trying to recruit people to help me. It's being delivered from Wayfair this afternoon. It's going to be 150 pounds. Who the hell's going to lift this? How do you get a blue bow around that? How do I get it into my Dodge Caravan? Able-bodied people, athletes, hockey players, just wake her up. And the blood supply, we've already gone over. We know it's sympathetic and parasympathetic, mostly parasympathetic when it's active. Celiac trunk, that's anatomy. Okay, the 4 tunics it's got, we're not going to go over that again. All the stuff that they do. Just a lovely way to express it. Smooth muscle out of the stomach, not only to churn, mix, move the chyme, but also to pummel it, which increases physical breakdown, ramming it into the small intestine. I mean, the stomach should be arrested for assault and battery. I can just see that. Okay. The whole thing that works here, again, 2-layer coat of alkaline mucus, surface layer traps bicarbonate-rich fluids. Okay, underneath it, that really protects it. Take it for somebody with gastric ulcers. It's so easy to disrupt that. Again, things, and this is more of a be careful type thing. If you're predisposed to this, somebody with these problems, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories all are ulcerogenic. 70% of the people who are on chronic, maybe the wrong, frequent use to chronic use of non-steroidal ibuprofen, naproxen, which is Aleve, it doesn't matter. Any of these things, good old aspirin, not Tylenol. Tylenol has its own subset of problems, particularly vis-a-vis your liver. Over 70% of those folks have some type of gastric bleeding. They just do. Okay, so there's a fine line between not enough and too much. You have to be aware of that. Alcohol, smoking, other medications, caffeine, all these things that cross, if it gets in your bloodstream fast, by way of your stomach, it has to be going through the lining, which isn't designed for it. So inherently it has to damage it. So when people talk about alcohol going to my head, it does, because it does cross. It's one of those things that can breach. A certain amount's going to breach it. And even bubbles make it happen faster. So carbonated alcoholic beverages, sparkling wine, champagne, beer, cross faster, which I'm gathering some of you are familiar with. Not pointing to anybody in particular. It's all right. I grew up with these people. Dare we recount my daughter and 19 years old, the fake ID anecdote? No, we don't need to go over that again. My son with his collection of, $100 bottles of bourbon. Oh, I don't think so. They didn't get it from me. They didn't get it from my ex. We don't drink. We effectively live. Just we were at a wedding. We didn't have a drink. It wasn't a dry wedding. We just had a drink. We're toasting with Pepsi. Not, not it happened to be a Pepsi crowd. Pepsi is Pittsburgh. Coke is the South. You want to go? You're not going to get a Pepsi down in Alabama or Georgia. You're not. Texas, no, it's Coke. Coke areas and there's Pepsi. So here's the structure. Here's the physiology of the stomach. These pits are everywhere. They are indentations, and effectively they are exocrine glands. Because the pit is the passageway. So again, the ductway that it goes in. If you see it back again, this is the ductway. It opens up into a particular glandular structure. And so this is all located in that mucosal layer. And at the base of it is that lamina propria. And then here you can see the muscularis mucosa behind it. This is the functionality. It has 4 different kinds of cells. Something called a mucous neck cell, whose function has always been unclear. Okay, that's here. You have, these are the regular surface cells, the ones that are constantly being replaced. You have these mucous neck cells. What they do is not ever been really ascertained. You have parietal cells. You remember we labeled these as part of anatomy. Chief cells, and then these green, these enteroendocrine cells, or G cells. G for gastric. Remember, stomach is gastric. This is the functionality. Ignoring the mucous neck, I'm not going to ask you about it anyway. Parietal cells do 2 things. Intrinsic factor, yes. You can't, if people have an autoimmune disease where this function does not exist, they have to get their B12 by injection or nasal gels. There's a way to get B12 artificially, or if you're somebody like me who's had stomach surgery, I have to just supplement the B12. There's some intrinsic factor, there's just not enough from the stomach surgery. So let's look at it that way. This is the big player. Parietal cells, these are proton pumps. Okay, and the hydrochloric acid has multiple function. It's nature's protein. It clobbers microorganisms that are there, microorganisms that haven't been destroyed by lysozyme, by IgA. As they get into your stomach, they are pummeled with, pH 1 to 3 hydrochloric acid. That stuff's nasty. You want to get it on your fingers. Okay. And it activates the proteolytic enzyme pepsin. So it's a combination of pepsin activation and the hydrochloric acid. Yes, we have to break down plant cell walls. A lot of what we ingest are plant cells and plant cell based. I mean, I know we had salad for dinner. We had a main dish. We actually had sandwiches, and we had a great big salad. And all that has to be broken down. And the bacteria is really important. That's what I was lacking when I was gobbling that stuff. Yes.
Why can't we eat like?
Pardon me?
Why do we get sick from meat?
Uncooked
Meat.
Oh. Probably it's more than there are going to be certain bacteria that are going to be producing, that are already starting to produce toxins. So the heating is going to play a role with it. Plus the heating is going to, basically the heating deactivates. It's almost like when we pasteurize something. When you pasteurize something, you're basically trying to get rid of most gut-causing problems in consumables. Cooking proteins, similar. So in meat, you were concerned with E. coli. In chicken, you're concerned with salmonella. In other foods, with salmonella. So and those are gram negatives. And so you're trying to. That's probably just the simplest explanation. So some of them have already. If you heat them to whatever the appropriate temperature, let's say between 160 and 180, you're going to get rid of most of the bacteria that could possibly be a problem, and certainly the toxins. I think that's the easiest way to express it. Whether I'm cooking burgers like I had the night before, or steak or chicken, I have a digital thermometer. And actually, it's analog, so it's instant analog. I don't leave home without it. And a lot of chefs don't. I'm not that I'm a chef, but a lot of they're very cognizant. I mean, if you got it depends. It's different when you're cooking a steak. You're cooking, and not everybody, is necessarily why you conserve filet mignon or really a prime cut at rare or medium rare. The problem with most of those raw proteins in the middle of the steak is muscle. It's sterile inside. It's not. It's effectively not. It's the exterior that you're worried, as opposed to a burger, which is ground meat. Who knows? I didn't see them grind it. You have no idea what they put in there. And that's really where things that worry you. And people will undercook that. Oh, I'll have my burger medium. It's like, oh boy. So a lot of pros, what they do, they will grind. They'll buy the chuck steak. They'll buy the sirloin. They'll grind it themselves. So then you know when you're cooking it what you're dealing with. That rather than something at the someplace wherever it was done, they weren't being careful. Saying. So the chief cells make the precursor protein, pepsinogen, that's activated by the hydrochloric acid. And indeed, as pepsin is produced, it has a positive feedback loop that makes more pepsin. So it's interesting. And here are the lipases. They are the ones that are coming from. So pepsinogen, which will be subsequently activated in the lipases from the chief cells. What's interesting, it's almost like an auto control system. The nervous system auto controls the digestive tract, this enteric nerve system. It controls peristalsis and segmentation. It controls the muscularis mucosa. It controls activating. So there are little receptors, stretch receptors, chemoreceptors, which are basically osmolarity receptors, okay, and chemoreceptors that are pH-oriented receptors. Those are really the three big things that control this. So as soon as you start putting food in your stomach, basically it sends the message chemically to these by local messengers to basically to the enteroendocrine cells, okay, we've got food coming in, get busy. And they're going to produce serotonin, which reinforces and activates it. Histamine here, the same histamine that you talk about with allergies, different receptors. These are H2 receptors. So there have been, Tagamet was the original product. There's some that are still there. You can buy, basically pill form that are H2 receptor blockers. They had some problem with one that had to be recalled, whose name escapes me some years ago. So a lot of people, with me, like with ulcers, we take things like that as well. I was taking Prilosec, which you can buy without a prescription. It's the proton pump blocker. But that was another arm of those were H2 blockers. Okay. The other thing that they produce is this somatostatin, which acts locally and does encourage it, and to a certain extent, it keeps growth hormone. It's the anti-growth hormone, because when you're eating, typically you want to use insulin, not growth hormone. Insulin and growth hormone are always competing with one another. When one's active, the other one is not. When one uses carbs, insulin. One uses fats, growth hormone. So at this point, we're in insulin and carb mode. Okay, and then most importantly, above them all, gastrin. That's really what G cells mean. The three things that activate your gut, your stomach, gastrin, acetylcholine, and histamine, probably more than anything else. Serotonin, perhaps to a lesser extent. So, the typical person who's predisposed to ulcers, sometimes we even see people have gastric tumors. Typically, when somebody has an ulcer like I did, part of the workup is they look for something called a ZE. It's one of those things every GI specialist you go to, the gastroenterologist goes, I get an ulcer, I get to do a workup, because if I get one of these, I have an article to publish. I get a writer for medical journal. ZE stands for Zollinger-Ellison. It's a fancy name, you don't have to know about it. And you're basically doing an analysis to to see if there's an inappropriately high level at all times of gastrin. And usually it's a tumor. And something would have to be treated as such. So I had that workup done as well. Mine came from basically not alcohol, but smoking like a chimney, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and a lot of stress. Some self-induced, some maritally induced. Not enough. He wasn't a good marriage. 3 nice kids, not a good marriage. So here you are, all the things, and it's a nice diagram that shows it. Harsh digestive conditions, protected, the mucosal barrier, bicarbonate rich, really really important thing to remember. This is the other, and this is more about what alcohol does and caffeine does. It's not so much the bicarbonate rich mucus that it violates, it's the tight junctions. The beauty of a lot of the digestive system, just like a blood-brain barrier, abundance of it's tough for stuff to get. So those tight junctions prevent those digestive juices, anything else that comes along to the party. And obviously, quickly replace 3 to 6. I mean, it's busy. Anything that breaches it, peptic or gastric really are synonymous. Duodenal ulcers are different because they occur in the duodenum. And so they can perforate, they can hemorrhage. Mine was hemorrhaging. That was because of all those transfusions, not perforating. Totally disagreed. I never tested positive, even when I had this done in September. When I was scoped in September, never tested positive with 2 of the biggest ulcer surgeries you can imagine. Most people have Helicobacter pylori. If they said most gastric carcinomas are caused by or directly related to a Helicobacter pylori, I'd give it a true. This is bullshit. Okay, and all of these things, NSAIDs, etc. That's a good size one. Mine was probably bigger. I had 12 at one point. My first gastroenterologist described it as, let me use this exact term, a train wreck. Not this healthy individual going to the gym tonight to work out. Walk around. And you go to the machine, it's like his. It's on 175, and I go down to 20. Aiden's got it like a 200, and I move it down to 20. Here they are. Here are the little devils. Okay, breakdown of food, holding, kind, denatures, all of those. Renin is there in infants. Milk protein, I wouldn't worry about that. The milk protein is the oddball. There's some breakdown that occurs there. Most of it occurs in the small intestine. This is part of it. This is why alcohol can get through there and cause damage. The only essential function is the intrinsic factor for B12, but we have other ways to get the B12 now. Years ago, they did not. Okay, the regulation, 3 liters of that juice daily, vagus, it stimulates its sympathetic decreaser. We're very familiar with that from our studies of the autonomic nervous system. Gastrin stimulates hydrochloric acid, gastrin antagonists, hormones by the small intestine. So the whole trick is once that food goes through, okay, and begins to enter the small intestine by way of the pyloric sphincter, again, stretch receptor, pH receptors, they read the acidity and immediately they start to produce something. As long as there's food in the stomach, entering the stomach, it's making gastrin. Now it's saying, okay, it's emptying, you don't need to make as much gastrin. So it's elegantly controlled. That acidity, it only comes in little squirts, half a teaspoon or so. So highly acidic that immediately the amount of alkalinity, the bicarb that is produced a lot by way of the pancreatic secretions, neutralizes right away. If it's not there in sufficient amount, now you're looking at duodenals. And they're a little bit, it's different. Gastric ulcers hurt when you eat right away. Duodenal ulcers, you have to have your stomach empty. And so you're looking 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes after eating. Trust me, with a gastric ulcer, I mean, I remember you'd eat, your eyes are bigger than, you get a taco, you get something with, that's got a lot of goodies. It's like, oh my God. And you're popping antacids to try to cope with it. And so there are lots of different things. There are different phases. I don't get excited about that so much. You can read through it. Things that get you ready. When your mouth starts to water, it started like, we're eating. Okay. And starts to stimulate these things as it begins to enter the stomach. Okay. Chemical stimuli, all of these things activate. Then release of the gastrin. Now we get the hydrochloric acid, et cetera, all of these things. And so as you see what happened, buffering action of ingested proteins causes pH to rise, and that activates more gastrin because we're supposed to be in an acidic environment. Not that. Okay. Low pH, if it's excessive acidity, as it does in between meals, we're not supposed to have gastrin. So it's very interesting. It has a lot to do with why medication, some are on an empty stomach, some are on a full stomach, sometimes to protect against it. Some we want to preclude them being exposed to acid. A lot of times they'll be coated. We call it an enteric coat. So the absorption occurs mostly in the small intestine, and it's not denatured or destroyed by the acidity. Okay, and so there's a lot of these things. There's stimulation of the intestinal. The food enters the small intestine. Okay, encourages the gastric glands to stomach continues secretory activities briefly, and eventually it's overridden as the intestine fills. So in the duodenum, causing inhibition. So what slows down your stomach physiologically? The duodenum begins to expand. The acidity. Chyme is also very fatty in nature. We've only partially started to break down fats, and very hypertonic. Okay, and too much, and that's the whole idea. The inhibitory effect from being overwhelmed because it's a small amount. And there's reflexes, and then we begin to get these enterogastrones. These are the chemicals that are involved. The reflex, okay, inhibits acid secretion in the stomach. So it basically, as it starts to enter the small intestine, says, okay, enough. Okay, and the enterogastrones, these are the two big hormones that the small intestine produces. Cholecystokinin and secretin. They increase intestinal motility. They make it busier, increase peristalsis, increase segmentation. Cholecystokinin, as its name would suggest, cholecysto means gallbladder, kinin means to activate. Tells your gallbladder, or in the absence of a gallbladder, which happens, the liver, to produce bile because we've got fats coming in, get busy, but at the same time, it increases the motility and the activity of your small intestine. Secretin basically is doing the same thing, increasing motility of the small intestine. And then on the other hand, it's telling the pancreas, okay, we have incoming here. We need bicarbonate-laden digestive juices. We need all of those wonderful enzymes to begin to break down the rest of the proteins that are there. We've only started carboxypeptidase and trypsin and chymotrypsin, which we're going to get to all of those digestively. A lot of the final is in the small intestine also. Those are those brush border enzymes. Remember the anatomy. It has those villi, and each of those villi have microvilli. Each of those villi are covered in cells in all directions, and those cells have a giant brush border. That makes them all that giant surface area. Those brush border enzymes are in the microvilli, and they're going to break down short chain amino acids and mostly dipeptides into monopeptides, which effectively into just amino acids. That's what we absorb, amino acids. We don't absorb disaccharides. That's why lactose intolerance is such a problem. It's monosaccharide. So it's galactose, glucose. Okay. So we have to have lactose, glucose, and fructose. And all of those can be relatively easily converted into, as I'm fond of saying, all roads lead to glucose. Because that's basically what we utilize for energy supply. For all of those things, fats are transported differently, nucleotides are broken down there. So the simplest component is what is able to come through those brush border areas. That's the beauty of that particular system. So it gives you, I mean, it's a nice summary of what it does here without me reading it to you. And this is a nice summary of all the things that the cholecystokinin does, inhibits the stomach, potentiates the liver and pancreas to do their thing, so it stimulates both of them. The gallbladder certainly, again, when I say it, because not everybody has a gallbladder is removed with some degree of frequency. This is really important. That's the common bile duct, the sphincter, the hepatopancreatic sphincter, that allows, you can cause the stuff to come there, but if you don't release the sphincter, it's not getting into the duodenum. Okay, there's other things that are there. Glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide or gastric inhibitory peptide. So it basically, this is a nice way of saying the fatty material comes in, stop insulin releasing, stimulates insulin release, stop hydrochloric acid, even though it's minor. Gastrin, what it does here, we're reviewing all the things, and you can see that. Same with histamine, same with intestinal gastrin, all the things that does. I'm not going to keep reading them to you, but you get, it's really, and I'm not going to go over all of these things. But understand it's a complicated, albeit well understood process. So I'll leave it here because we've got to do the proton pump. We'll do that Friday. Okay, all good? See you. Thank you. Have fun. Have fun storming the castle.